Hello, and welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, the weekly news and views program from the Philanthropy Mastermind series. I'm Jay Frost. We'll begin, as always, with the gifts of the week and the latest headlines shaping the philanthropic landscape. Then we'll turn to two important conversations. First, I'll be joined by Julia Campbell, founder and principal of J. Campbell Social Marketing, to explore how nonprofits can navigate the increasingly treacherous and fast-changing world of social media. Later, I'll share my discussion with Ted Hart, immediate past president and CEO of the Charities Aid Foundation of America and author of The DAF Revolution, about the powerful and sometimes controversial role of donor-advised funds in shaping philanthropy today. Let's get started. Here are this week's top 5 gifts, or actually 6, because there's once again a tie. Number 5, $20 million from the Presbyterian Health Foundation to establish the Oklahoma Children's OU Health Presbyterian Health Foundation Heart Center. It's the largest single gift in PHF's 40-year history and will centralize and expand pediatric cardiac care as part of a broader public-private project. Number 4, $21 million from the A. James and Alice B. Clark Foundation to Stevens Institute of Technology. This is the largest donation in Stevens' 155-year history and will enhance the Clark Scholars Program, create the Clark Scholars Philanthropy Challenge Endowed Fund, and name the A. James Clark Residential Tower. Number 3 this week is a tie, $50 million. First gift I'll mention here is from Brad and Alice Smith to Marshall University. This is the largest gift in the school's history and the largest by Brad Smith, who is the president, to their institution. This will advance the Marshall for All initiative aimed at eliminating student debt by the university's 2037 bicentennial. Also at $50 million, a gift from Daniel or Dan Riccio, to a 26-year Apple veteran, to UMass Amherst. The largest gift in campus history will name the Daniel A. Riccio Junior College of Engineering and fund scholarships, fellowships, professorships, and new initiatives. Number 2 this week is $60 million from Dr. Bruce I. Jacobs to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. The gift, which is the largest single gift in Wharton's history, launches the Master of Science in Quantitative Finance, the school's first new degree program in 50 years. And number 1 at the time we compiled this list, $150 million from the Moody Foundation to the Houston Tillotson University in Austin, Texas. This is the largest gift in the foundation's history and believed to be the single largest donation to any HBCU. It'll fund student housing, academic spaces, scholarships, and endowments. We'll have listings of a couple of gifts that were just announced in the next few minutes. Have we missed a big gift announcement for the week that's passed? Almost certainly. Let us know by contacting me directly through LinkedIn or by email at j@donorsearch.net. Now for this week's top news items. Nearly 600 nonprofits have signed an open letter condemning the administration's efforts to target progressive groups through federal audits and investigations. According to the Nonprofit Times, these organizations argue that such actions amount to political retaliation and threaten the independent voice of civil society. They're calling on Congress to act, insisting nonprofit advocacy should be protected from partisan coercion. A new study shows that 1 in 4 donors have stopped giving to at least one nonprofit because of a lack of trust. Once again, according to the Nonprofit Times, a report indicates that transparency, accountability, and responsiveness are among the biggest concerns. Donors want clear reporting and follow-through, and fundraisers may need to rethink how they build trust, because right now, many are choosing to walk away. Bill Gates raised an alarm this week over rising child mortality in northern Nigeria and pledged $912 million to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. For a news item in Philanthropy News Digest this week, Gates warned that without renewed investment, the progress achieved in recent decades could slip backwards, especially among the most vulnerable communities. Regulators are investigating a donor-advised fund called SDG Impact Fund, which claims to hold more than $10 billion in non-cash and crypto assets, According to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, donors say they've been, quote, ghosted with very little philanthropic payout. In 2022, according to the article, the fund distributed only 0.1% of its reported assets, well under what's typical for similar funds, as we will be hearing in our interview with Ted Hart in a few minutes. Thanks to strong pushback by nonprofit leaders, the combined federal campaign has been saved this week. You may recall that in a previous episode, we discussed how the campaign had been frozen. The Nonprofit Times is reporting that federal employees and retirees rely on the CFC for workplace giving, and the program has raised more than $8 billion since its founding. And losing it would have meant a serious blow to planned and predictable giving for many smaller nonprofits. And once again, it appears that that strong pushback has led to the program being reopened. Some major news broke too late for our top 5 list this week, as I mentioned earlier. And according to Philanthropic News Digest, Chronicle Philanthropy, and other sources, the following gifts have also just been announced. The University of Arkansas has received $20 million to expand study abroad access. And Mackenzie Scott has pledged $70 million to the United Negro College Fund to strengthen historically Black colleges and universities. And a gift from Shonda Rhimes to Dartmouth results in a new namesake dorm, helping with student housing capacity. Once again, if you know about a gift that we have missed, please do let us know. Are you a social media user? Have you ever had something go wrong with a post? Maybe had something you said be terribly misunderstood by friends or perhaps strangers? This week's story about Misty Hunt, a school board official in Pennsylvania, provides a sobering reminder of how quickly things can escalate online, even when the intention behind the words is very different. Misty Hunt posted, "One down, hundreds to go," on social media, referring to planting milkweed seeds for monarch butterflies. But this was on the same day that Charlie Kirk was murdered. And because the accompanying video didn't upload showing the milk seed planting, readers misinterpreted the post as something far more inflammatory. Since then, she's faced threats, her role in the school board has been challenged, and as The Guardian reports, she's even stepping back partly out of concern for her own personal safety and her children's safety. Nonprofits are not immune to misunderstandings like this, and arguably they're even more exposed today than they've been ever in the past. A stray post, missing context, misread tone, all of that can be amplified by social media and, of course, polarized audiences. For insights on how nonprofits can adjust to this increasingly volatile social environment, we turn to Julia Campbell, founder and principal of J. Campbell Social Marketing, and one of the country's top nonprofit social media experts. In our conversation, we dig into how nonprofits can protect their reputations, how to communicate clearly under pressure, and how to respond when things go sideways. Here is that conversation. Julia, thank you so much for taking time to talk today. For people who don't know you, you do a lot of work in the social media space, but you also do a lot of work in your community. And maybe we can start with those two things.
Yes. You want me to talk about it?
Yeah, I'd love that. Can you talk about what you're doing back on the home front?
Yes. So I have 2 children. One is my daughter's 16, my son is 10. And in December 2020, I decided to run for a position on the school board. I was very frustrated with the district's handling of getting back to school in COVID, and some of the policies, some of the conversations that were happening. So I decided instead of complaining about it, I would take up a volunteer position. And I've been reelected 2 times, just this past April. And, in my time there, I've really learned a lot. I think it's very valuable. I mean, people always ask, it's such a thankless job and it's so long and the meetings are long and you get such vitriol and hatred sometimes from the community and people misunderstand you. But I think that it's so valuable for me to give back, but just to help understand the issues that are facing the students. And for me, it's about advocating for every student and advocating for equitable policies for every student. And that's really why I joined the school board.
And this is not a huge school board in a gigantic community, right? So there must be some level of intimacy. People really know you and the other members, and they know the students, they know the teachers. Is that right?
Yes, I wish I should know the exact number of students, but it changes all the time. But there's one high school, one middle school, and three elementary schools. And there's seven of us on the board, just six of us right now. And yeah, we're neighbors. We are a regional school board, so we are two towns that are very small. My town of Wenham is 4,000 people. And everyone knows everyone's business, and everyone knows, we all see people at our kids' sporting events and plays and after school activities. And we're all kind of really involved, in other community. Like I'm on the Human Rights Committee for Wenham as well, which I think is really important. But it is a pretty small, it's a pretty small community, which can be good and can be bad at times.
Well, that's the thing. If in a place where people know each other, at least by reputation, if not personally, walking down the street, I know that that can be fraught sometimes, especially because we all care about our kids, and we're worried if they're doing well or what their teachers are like. But you would think that in a small community would also mean that people would have a certain amount of I don't know, decorum or respect for one another. Have you seen a change in the last, few years, maybe during your time on the school board in terms of how people interact and is there a reason for that?
Absolutely. And, we were talking about this earlier. We are both huge advocates of using social media for good, but I 1000% can draw a line between the misinformation and hateful conversations and sort of the foment that's going on. It's all due to pretty much Facebook, some Twitter/X. Some things I've seen on Instagram, but mostly it's been on Facebook. So I've really been noticing since COVID, sort of this downfall and disintegration in civil discourse, especially around issues, anything related to, well, and everything is political now, is what it turns into. You could post on the town Facebook page that you're looking for someone to paint your house, and it will somehow disintegrate into like neighbors fighting over something. It's getting very out of control, and I see that there's sort of like a one specific group I know kind of running this particular type of vitriol and hatred. The other thing I've been seeing that I think is, just so relevant for those of us that are on social media is the absolute like calling out people. So taking screenshots of maybe something that you said off the cuff and it was completely out of context, taking it out of context, making it a bigger deal, sending it to the newspaper. I've just seen neighbors turning on neighbors because of something they saw on Facebook. And I've really learned kind of to stay out of that kind of conversation. So I used to go into the Facebook group. I used to post on Facebook things that I thought were, I like to oppose disinformation is what I really like to do. I mean, if something is said that I disagree with, that's one thing. But if something is said that's completely wrong, I sort of like to say, oh no, that's actually not what happened in the meeting, or that's not what happened. Let me clarify. No one seems very interested in that, unfortunately. So, so I've been trying. It's really been difficult for people that want to volunteer and want to do good work and want to be out there and be outspoken about issues. It's been really difficult. Like personal attacks, I think have increased. I've received like, threats basically. It's really been it's been really exhausting. And like I think for other school committee members, I do think it's really wearing on them. For me, I don't know. I think I just am so used to my whole life fighting for what I believe in and fighting for social justice and encountering people that, hated my viewpoint. So I'm used to fighting for it. But it gets hard when it's personal and when it's literally like your neighbors saying misinformation about you.
And this, I know, has really come to a boiling point recently. And of course, there was the murder of Charlie Kirk, and that has
Yeah.
become a big discussion point on every social media platform from every possible perspective.
Oh, right.
But that's even found its way into local school board discussions. Is that right?
Oh, okay. What happened was that this is really true. I mean, the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, he went on Charlie Kirk's podcast and he told people if they see anyone celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, to take screenshots and send it to their employers to dox them and to get them fired. So this is the Vice President of the United States said this, and it then became something that everyone was doing on social media. So unfortunately, one of our school committee members posted something that was, I think, a little off color and a little crass on a private page, that on a private profile that somehow got screenshotted. As we know, you can't say anything on social media without it being totally public. You can't even delete it. People will find it. It got us screenshotted. We received a lot of emails about it on the school committee. And unfortunately, this particular school committee member, he has served on the committee for 10 years. He's a father of two. He lost his job and lost his coaching position and resigned from the school committee out of fear for his safety and for his family's safety. So it got to that point where now we are actually attempting to ruin people's lives. And to me, I think there's a line here where you can disagree. Like, I disagree with what he said, but I don't think he should have lost his job. I don't think his life should be completely ruined over something off the cuff that he said on social media. So if you want to find it, you can Google it. Hamilton Wenham School Committee, big scandal. It was in the papers here. If you really want to find exactly what he said. But to me, that's not the point. I think what's happening is the temperature is rising and people are not thinking before they post. They're not thinking before they respond. There's so much anger. And then, of course, the algorithms reward that. So the first thing anyone sees when they go online, I remember I didn't even know that this post existed. But then, of course, it was the first thing I saw the next day when I logged in because everyone was commenting on it and it was just going out of control. So the algorithms reward that. They reward anger, they reward they reward engagement, whether it's negative or positive. So we have to remember that's something that's happening too, and that might not be what's actually happening in reality. It's just sort of a microcosm online, and I think it's really dangerous.
And here, this is a really important a segue into the other reason I wanted to speak with you, and that has to do with the impact of all this on the nonprofit sector
Oh.
as social media becomes more complicated. Because when you were first writing about this work a number of years ago,
Mhm.
I know much of that was really showing all the opportunities for organizations to showcase their mission and have real meaningful conversations with people who either are already engaged in the work or might have a heart for the work. Um,
Right.
but that means it's all exposed. And a lot of this probably does have to do with the algorithm. So could you talk about that a little more for a moment
Mhm.
as we move from the one discussion about one school board where this is really affecting people's lives to maybe this broader spectrum of nonprofits, which are also under political attack? How does
Mhm.
the algorithm figure in here? In other words, if I'm a user
Yes.
of Instagram and I'm just having fun and looking at things or TikTok, why is it that I might start to see things that would frame things in possibly a negative light and then see them more frequently?
Mhm. The algorithm rewards timeliness, urgency, and engagement. So if it's something that's very timely, if it's something that's brand new, they love the shiny and new. And if it's something that's getting a lot of engagement, that's why a lot of what you see in your feed is either very extreme, very positive, like very heartwarming, like a service person that has come home from war and their dog sees them and it's just like so heartwarming. that gets so much engagement, or something that will make a lot of people angry. And there'll be a lot of flame wars going on in the comments. That gets a lot of engagement. But what I'm seeing now, and what I worry for nonprofits, is that no matter what we're posting, it's becoming a flame war in the comments. It's becoming, someone is going to be opposed to your mission. Someone is going to be opposed to what you do. The vitriol and the absolute, just the distrust of nonprofits that's actually being, I think, exacerbated by the way the federal government is treating nonprofits right now, taking away their funding, threatening to revoke their 501(c)(3) status if they don't agree with lockstep with the party. I think that those are really weighing heavily on nonprofits, and they're trying to figure out what they can post to get engagement, but what they can post that's not going to get the bad kind of engagement. And I think for me, what I tend to see right now is nonprofits being very quiet and very hesitant in this moment. And I think I think it's more important than ever to be talking about your mission. I think it's also more important than ever to find a group of people. Like there's a museum social media managers group on Facebook. It's one of my only Facebook groups that I really like. It's such a positive place. It's all arts and culture organizations, social media managers talking to each other about these kinds of struggles, about how, they posted about like a pumpkin painting event and somehow it became political for some reason, because there was a rainbow involved. It's like there's literally, I feel like it's getting to the point where nonprofits are thinking there's nothing we can say right now that's not going to engender some kind of bad comment. And I think I'm not sure how we can get out of this moment. Um, I wish that I knew how we could get out of this moment, but I think it's important for us not to be quiet.
So if we don't know how to get out of it necessarily, because there are a lot of influences that are impacting
Yeah.
that, what about getting through it? When you talk
Yeah,
to
getting
clients,
through
and you
it.
have plenty of them, and you also give addresses at conferences, that's where you're about to go today.
Mhm,
I, I'm sure you're giving some advice that's really for the moment. What are the
mhm.
kinds of things that you're suggesting to nonprofits who want to remain in the public eye, but they want to minimize the risk of being improperly or labeled as somehow, negative in some way to the
Mhm.
community?
I think really do an assessment of where you are online. So really look at the social media accounts that you have. And I know, Jay, you and I did that a few years ago. I got off Twitter when it became X. I just had to have a real heart to heart with myself. Thankfully, I don't really have anyone else to answer to. So it's a little bit of an easier conversation. I could just decide. But I had 18,000 followers and I'd really worked hard to build up a community there. And that's how I met a lot of people and a lot of my friends in the sector and a lot of consultants, heard about a lot of conferences. And it was really pretty devastating for me to leave, but I knew it was the time. I knew I had to. So just do a gut check at your organization. Think about where you are, what kind of conversations are happening there. Is it more toxic than not? Is it more helpful than not? Maybe it's time to switch to somewhere like Threads or Blue Sky, or a little bit places that are a little bit more positive. I mean, I see so much positivity on Threads. Maybe it's just my algorithm showing me positive things, and certainly on Blue Sky. So thinking about first and foremost your goals, your audience, but then really what are your values? Like what organizations or what platforms are aligning with your values? And I think that's incredibly challenging right now as we learn about basically the sort of exploitation of our attention and our anger. Every algorithm rewards that. The other thing I would say is lean into the platforms where you own the information. So starting a Substack or starting a podcast or starting a blog, focusing on your email list, because you own that, you control that information, and you control your email list. And there's not an algorithm that controls that. Google does sort of a little bit control the open rate, but it's just not filtered. You're not going to get as much filtering, and you really can speak directly to your audience. So thinking maybe what are some other ways outside social media that you can reach people, and doubling down on the platforms that where you own the information and you can own the attention rather than renting it.
Is there an element the AI tools that may be helpful here, or in terms of some of this work?
Oh, I think that this would be a great discussion to actually have with ChatGPT, and I might do this afterwards. I like to talk to my personal ChatGPT, who now knows me pretty well, and ask it questions like this. Say, I am really struggling with all of the anger and sort of the trolling on social media right now. I'm really worried it's detrimental to my nonprofit. What are some ways I can combat it? What are some other platforms that I could be exploring? What are some other ways that I could get outreach out into the community? And really like using an AI tool to brainstorm, that's going to be really helpful. There's also, I still think video is the best way. I know that there are so many tools you can use to create AI content with video, but when I use them, I just use them for editing. So you tell your story, be authentic. I think that's what's really going to cut through the clutter. And I just gave a keynote at a conference this week on, storytelling in the digital age. That is how we are going to actually stand out and make a difference, because no one can replicate our stories and our lived experience and the things that we see on the ground and the stories of our clients. Like no AI tool can replicate that. It can certainly help you brainstorm and craft ideas and edit ideas, but all of the content online that's being generated right now, a lot of the content on social media, I really still think that your stories are your best tool in your tool belt and the best kind of content you can share.
A lot of this has to do, really, in the end, with how we protect the institutions that are doing the work that we love. But it's
Mm,
also important that we protect our employees and our staffs and our leaders, our
yes.
board members. And you alluded to that in a sense by even talking about your colleagues on the school board there. Do you have any thoughts about how organizations can be there for
Mhm.
their staff if they come under attack, their staff and board and volunteers?
I think you need to have a policy. So something that I regret that we did not do on the school board, well, we are limited by open meeting law. So every conversation we have has to be in public and it has to be on a posted agenda. So when this happened, we had a meeting that night, but we had nothing posted on the agenda. So we couldn't discuss it. And I really was wanting to discuss it, but we have to follow the proper procedures and protocols of that. All I want to do is call a fellow school committee member and talk about it, but I can't. So I think having those policies and procedures those are our guardrails, but for your organization you might have different guardrails. Maybe you want to have an emergency meeting. What you want to make sure that happens, I think we did a great job here on the school board. You don't want people to speak on behalf of your organization when they're not authorized to do so. So you don't want someone to say, oh, I support, our organization stands with Jane Doe and her comments. Maybe you do and you want to do that, but I would make sure the organization, it's a statement that you want to make as an organization and stand together and really try to figure out how you're going to approach this moment. Every comment, every sort of, it's all going to be different. It's going to be a case by case basis, but having some kind of policy, having some kind of maybe emergency, crisis PR. I remember when we used to all have like crisis PR plans, but having that in place, what's going to happen? Who are we going to call? How are we going to mobilize together? And I really think standing behind people, we have so many differences, and I think our differences make us great, but I do think if we're all working in an organization together on the same mission, we don't all have to think alike, but we kind of have to have each other's backs. That's how I feel. Um, it's hard, it's very difficult, but I think at the end of the day, staying focused on the mission and the vision, but having those guardrails, protocols in place, especially having a social media policy, really figuring out, can you be friends with clients? Can you comment about your work? What can what can your employees post on LinkedIn, not controlling what they post. Like I would never say that, but controlling maybe what they say on behalf of the organization. So the school board, we have policies and protocols as a school board, but I can't control what someone says on their own personal Facebook page. We can't. We just can't. We can't control that. So having policies, professional policies in place, but then understanding that people are still human and sometimes make mistakes. And, I think just being kind and having compassion goes
You
a long
mentioned
way.
you mentioned earlier that organizations shouldn't be quiet. Why is that?
Mhm. This moment is just too important. Our democracy is failing. I mean, I can go on and on, but I think the moment that we're in, especially for nonprofits as it relates to our institutions, we need to explain the work that we do to the world and why it's important and what would happen if our doors closed and what would be lost and the value that we provide and the benefits that we provide. I think what we do a lot is we talk about what we do and how we do it. And we post on Facebook, like, oh, we had this award ceremony, or oh, this board member got this accolade, or oh, we were in the paper, or this. But we don't actually talk about the vision, our vision for a better world, like what we're trying to achieve. So I was talking earlier about No Kid Hungry, and I really love everything that they do on social media. They just continually are posting about why it's so important to talk about food insecurity, why no child should go hungry, why there should be free lunch, why food insecurity for children goes up in the summer when they don't have lunches in schools. They talk about the issues and they're very focused on the world that they want to create, which is no kid hungry. And they're staying true to that and they're not veering off topic and they're not talking about the Emmys and they're not, that's all fine and good if you want to jump on a meme here and there, but staying true to your mission and your vision and letting people know what you stand for. And those are the organizations that really get these massive followings behind them, these really like obsessive followings that would follow them anywhere because they're not afraid to stand up for what they believe in, even in the face of federal budget cuts. I mean, I can't even imagine. We just actually at our school had our farm to school program cut, the federal program that helps provide fresh local produce from local farms to our schools. So talking about that and saying this is happening, like we can't pretend this is not happening. What are the implications of this? And unfortunately, being prepared for a little blowback. But I think most of us have most of us have spines of steel at this point. If we've been working in the sector long enough on some of these issues long enough, we know the challenges, we know the obstacles, we know the naysayers, and just kind of shun the naysayers and really focus on the people that embrace you, that love you, that want to spread the word, and that want to get on the train and help you create your vision for a better world.
Thank you for all this, Julia. I appreciate your insights. If people want to
Yes.
read more of your work or see you when you're out on there on the road, what's the best way of following you?
Yes, I love LinkedIn. So I'm just Julia Campbell on LinkedIn. I have a podcast, Nonprofit Nation. If you just look it up in your podcast app, those are kind of my two favorites. And my website is jcsocialmarketing.com.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Jay.
Our thanks again to Julia for sharing her insights on these topics. Now, from crises of communication to questions of confidence in giving, our next conversation tackles one of the most debated tools in philanthropy right now, something we alluded to earlier in the program: donor advised funds. DAFs can move money very quickly. They can expand donor participation. They can offer flexibility, but they also raise tough questions about transparency, payout, and public trust. To help us separate heat from light, I'm joined by Ted Hart, immediate past president and CEO of the Charities Aid Foundation of America, and author of a new book, The DAF Revolution. We had this conversation earlier today. Ted lays out what DAFs are and aren't, and why they've grown so rapidly, what reforms are on the table, and how nonprofits can engage donors using DAFs without losing sight of mission and momentum. Here's that conversation. Ted, thank you very much for being here today to discuss your new book. I'm really excited to see you and to hear about it. This is not your first book, though. This is number what?
Number 8.
Number 8. Okay, so why write about DAFs and why write about them now?
Well, I ran CAF America for 12 years, building it from 25 million to roughly $1 billion per year, granting close to $5 billion over that period of time. And after 12 years, I felt it was time to go. And what I wanted to do is to write a book, the very first comprehensive book on donor advised funds, and it was published on September 3rd.
Congratulations again on the publication. There's a lot that goes into writing a book, especially when you have talked to as many people as you have to write it, because I know you just didn't only rely on what you knew, which was substantial, but you went out and talked to a lot of other people in the field. How many people was it? It was over 100, I believe.
Yeah, over 120 experts from across the industry, critics and professionals who are in running donor advised funds as well. I can say when I set out to write the book, I set out to write a comprehensive book, and I thought I knew a little bit about donor advised funds, having run one for 12 years, and I did. But I can tell you that I learned as much as I knew in writing this book because the experts that I interviewed were incredibly generous, both with their input and their commentary, but also case studies and data that help support this book. So it became a much bigger project than I set out to. I thought, having written 7 other books, I had sort of plotted out about 6 or 7 months to put this book together. It took well over a year to write this book. Part of that was tracking down the right people to interview, again, both critics and those who are big supporters of donor advised funds, because I wanted to make sure that this book was representative of all thoughts about donor advised funds, so that the principal audiences, of which there are 4 that I wrote this book, can rely on this book as being a complete set of case studies, best practices, and information about donor advised funds. So those 4 categories, those 4 pillars, as I call them, that we wrote this book for is, first of all, of course, donors. Anyone who's interested in philanthropy and anyone who's particularly interested in either starting a donor advised fund or having a donor advised fund. The second category are philanthropic advisors, whether those are lawyers, financial advisors, philanthropic advisors. And chapter 5 was specifically written for them because it has the advisor's checklist for success in donor advised funds to help their clients be more successful and help them feel more knowledgeable. The next very big category that I wrote this book for are nonprofits who would like to get more money from donor advised funds. And I think, you and I have been in the industry long enough, certainly over the last many years, I think it's safe to say that many nonprofits sort of have a love and hate relationship with donor advised funds because they seem so different, and they are. Because if I am a nonprofit and I receive a grant from a private foundation or corporation or an individual, I know whether I'll be successful or not. I can go back and solicit them. So building that relationship with donors and advisors to donor advised funds is extremely important. So chapter 6 was specifically written as a nonprofit guide to donor advised funds. And then the fourth category are donor advised fund sponsors themselves. They are all 501c3 nonprofit organizations, but they're not all as large as Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab. There's over 1,000 donor advised funds across the country, many of them very, very small at community foundations and other institutions. And so we've created in the book, chapter 4, which are best practices for running a donor advised fund. And while that chapter is really written for donor advised fund sponsors, it's also a look behind the curtain for donors and advisors and others who are interested in just understanding how do donor advised funds run.
So those are 4 big audiences, and they intersect, but they don't always talk to one another. So what was it like to write a book for these 4 different parties who are all like the wise men around the elephant?
That's right. Yeah, everybody has their opinions, and it was important to me as the book sort of unfolded over time to make sure that I could authentically represent all 4 audiences and to provide guidance to all 4 in terms of how the staff revolution, which is really just getting started, the 120 plus experts that I call the DAF 120 are really quite certain that donor advised funds will continue to grow, will continue to be important in philanthropy, and some feel we're just getting started.
And let's get a sense of the size and scope. There are some people who watch and listen to this who know how big this is, but many do not. I believe it's now crested above where the private foundations are, but you have a much better picture about where it is today. How big is the scope and size of the DAF marketplace?
Yeah, sure. You're correct in that donor advised funds are growing faster and granting more money percentage-wise than private foundations. And donor advised funds and private foundations are, I think, in a lot of ways, rightfully compared with each other. Private foundations, for those who don't know, do have a 5% minimum payout rate each year, which was established in the Tax Act of 1969, but the 5% rule was not set until the 1970s. And since then, what was meant to be a floor has, for many people, become a ceiling, because private foundations only grant about 6.6% of their assets each year. And they have over $1 trillion sitting in private foundations right now, of which there are over 100,000 private foundations in this country. So shifting over to donor advised funds, there's about $250 billion sitting in donor advised funds, and they grant somewhere between 15 to 20% on average per year. So much higher percentage of their money going out, but they are growing faster than private foundations.
You mentioned before that you've interviewed people who are kind of pro and con. I don't know why they would be pro and con exactly about DAFs. It's an instrument. Fundamentally, it's an instrument for giving. But you just highlighted why, at least when you make a comparison between the private foundations and donor advised funds, it seems like donor advised funds writ large, looking at all of them together, do have a higher payout rate. So why is it that they've come in for such criticism?
Well, I think, I have interviewed many critics. A couple of them are mentioned in the book. I interviewed Ray Madoff. If you don't know Ray Madoff, you can look her up. She's at Boston College, a professor who has really made it her business to critique donor advised funds. And to be fair to her, I think she's really done a lot of good over the 10 plus years that she's been sort of prime critic of donor advised funds. But what's happened in that 10 years is that donor advised funds writ large have really taken that criticism very seriously, whether it's transparency or payout rates. And I think right now it's really tough to share those same criticisms from 10 years ago on the current donor advised funds, because many of them are doing a much, much better job self-regulating themselves and really encouraging donors to move money out. There isn't a single donor advised fund that I spoke to that said, well, we'd really rather that they not grant because we want to keep the money in our coffers. Although that is what critics fear, is that donor advised funds are holding money back. But in fact, a much larger percentage is going out of private foundation or out of donor advised funds than they are from private foundations.
Is there a large variance in terms of the payout rates or payout types, like where the monies go between one instrument and another, or one place like Vanguard versus something else?
I think it's pretty general across the industry. Now, there are 3 different types of donor advised funds, and I think that's important to mention to your listeners. Many of them may be very familiar with the first category, which are known as national sponsors. That's Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, and others that hold very large assets and represent a very large number of donor advised fund advisors. The second category are community foundations, which are also very active in private foundations. They might be, or in donor advised funds, they might be smaller in size, but offer a very different value perspective in that they are generally geographically oriented and have much deeper knowledge of the charities that they're granting to, whereas the national firms in many instances are going to grant to any eligible charity that is on the IRS master file. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's legal, but it's a different approach. And I think donors who use national firms are looking for efficiency. They're looking for technology. They're looking for speed. Donors who work with community foundations are certainly looking for those things as well, but a deeper knowledge and perhaps some advisory on where their money can make a best difference in their own community. And then the third category of donor advised funds are religious-based organizations or mission-based organizations, sometimes referred to as single mission donor advised funds, of which there are many. And they often will overlay their own ethical standards, their own types of charities. So they may be more restrictive in the type of charities that they grant to, but meeting the needs of their donors who want to make sure that their money is going towards the type of charities that they're looking for.
I know one of the reasons that nonprofits have had such difficulty understanding and maybe trying to plot a strategy for appealing to people who might have a donor advised fund has been this kind of mysteriousness about it. And I'm sure the book will help to pull away some of that mystery and that fog that surrounds these things. But I'm wondering if you have some kind of top level advice for nonprofits who are thinking about how do we identify people with DAFs? How do we appeal to them in a way that's meaningful? Those kinds of basic hallmarks that I'm sure you cover in detail in the book in some fashion.
Yeah, and I do. Chapter 6 has the 10 best strategies for nonprofits who are looking to get more money from donor advised funds. And it starts with number 1, which is absolutely without a doubt the best thing that a nonprofit can do. And the first thing that they must do is to seek the platinum seal of transparency from GuideStar. Why does that matter? It's because the GuideStar database powers so many donor advised funds. What donors know about you and whether or not they're likely to find you as an opportunity to advise a grant is in many instances going to be what you have provided to GuideStar and whether or not you have seen fit to earn that platinum seal of transparency, which every nonprofit can. It does take some work. I believe it's properly robust. Yet only less than 10% of the nonprofits in the GuideStar database have earned a transparency seal of approval. And so that is number 1. And then number 2 is this is old-fashioned relationship building. Every donor that you currently have, you should be asking, do you have a donor advised fund? That should be in your database. And yes, you should treat donor advised fund advisors differently. Why? Because they've already given. You don't have to convince them to give. All you have to do is make a case that they should give and advise that grant to you. So it really is a leg up, and I provide research that's been done that proves that. Research that shows that those who use these strategies actually do receive more money, but it is a strategy. And it's a new way of thinking about fundraising, which absolutely every nonprofit who's successful absolutely has to follow these best practices, or they're not going to maximize grants from donor advised funds.
And just to make the point even more clear to those who are new to this, those donor advised funds can be, the threshold for setting up a fund can be quite small now. So you're not just talking about people who have hundreds of millions of dollars. It might be $5,000 to start a fund.
That's right. Of course, you're going to be excited if you have a donor who has hundreds of millions of dollars of donor advised fund. But you're absolutely right. Many donor advised funds now have no minimum to establish your fund, and you can fund that over time. You can invest that, have it grow over time, and many donor advised fund advisors do. One big strategy I talk about in the book are those who grant during their income earning years and plan to give it away while they're retired. When they have more time to be thoughtful about where they would like their grant to go. They may want to have their children and grandchildren be involved as advisors, have them as successor advisors, or have this be a family project. All of these strategies are shared in the book, but it's important for nonprofit organizations to understand just how complex this is and how successful you can be if you have a really robust strategy.
This seems to be a way of segueing into a discussion about what they're thinking as fund owners. So for those who have a donor advised fund, what kind of changes have occurred? What are they thinking about today that maybe they weren't thinking about a few years ago? That might be helpful, especially for nonprofits to understand, so they can be more empathetic when they reach out to these folks.
Yeah, one of the 120, the DAF 120 folks that I spoke to is Rebecca Moffat, who's the president of Vanguard Charitable. And I think she put it best because she has 20 years now at Vanguard Charitable. So she's really seen the growth over time. And what she says is donors aren't necessarily looking for anything different now than they were 20 years ago. They just have access to a lot more data to find what they're looking for. So for nonprofit organizations, you need to be thinking about what data are you providing? How are you proving your worth? How are you communicating with the donors who give? Because the hunger for information and the opportunity to feel that you're impactful as a donor has not changed, but your opportunity to measure that and to know that is true has dramatically changed.
Ted, you've been involved in this field for a long time in a lot of ways, and not just your work recently with CAF, but also everything else. People can look through your history and see all your 7 other books before. What has your experience personally been like with giving and how it's transformed, especially with the rise of DAFs? Is this an instrument you take advantage of as well? I should ask that.
I do have a donor advised fund, and I do involve my children in where we make grants from our donor advised fund. So very much utilizing the strategies that are covered in the book. We're good examples of that, but so are millions of other families.
And why is this important to you as a donor? Why has this been an instrument that's been particularly appealing, especially when you work with family members to give?
Yeah, well, it's evolved over time. Chapter 3 in the book is the official history of the donor advised fund revolution, starting in 1931 with the very first donor advised fund started in New York City during the Great Depression. But no one really heard of donor advised funds or really did much with donor advised funds for many, many years. It wasn't until the 1990s when the national donor advised funds were created. And there were many legal precedents that took place, and they're all documented in Chapter 3, that made it possible for donor advised funds to become the flexible vehicles that they are today. Being so flexible, they really can meet the needs of most any donor, whether you want to give long-term or you want to give tomorrow.
Now, you've had a front seat looking at this issue, not just for this book, but in all the work at Charities Aid Foundation. What do you anticipate coming along the pike? And I don't mean necessarily legislatively. That's complex, and it's influenced by lots of different factors we can't necessarily predict or control for. But you have seen where donors want to go and where these nationals, especially, but also the community foundations, are seeking to go to give tools to people who want to give, not just domestically, but globally. Where do you anticipate DAFs go next?
Yeah, well, Chapter 8 speaks to that topic. So I took all of the transcripts because I did Zoom meetings with all of the folks that I interviewed. So I had this enormous data set of more than 120 transcripts from the best minds in donor advised funds. And I crunched through all of that to determine what are the common themes? What are these DAF 120 experts advising us about the future? And the number one topic is that millennials and Gen Z donors are dramatically different than their parents. They are looking for more impact, more transparency. They're looking for more data. And of course, all of that is transformed by the technology that is not only available now, but the technology that is being developed right now. Joe Fisher, who is the president and CEO at REN, predicts that AI is going to be a very big part of donor advised funds in helping really cull through a lot of information and helping donors determine where can they be most impactful in their giving. Nonprofit organizations need to be prepared to provide the kind of information that can lead donors directly to them.
So where does this lead you next? I mean, again, this is book number 8. I guess you've completed your work at Charities Aid Foundation. Is that right?
Yes, I left specifically to write this book. I can say I didn't expect it to take this long, but as it evolved and as more and more experts became available, I started learning just as much as I knew about donor advised funds. It just became really fascinating to me. And then as the book came together, I realized that this is a very comprehensive soup to nuts analysis of donor advised funds and how each of the 4 core constituencies can succeed. So the future, I think, is very bright for donor advised funds. As I point out in the book, while the revolution is underway, and it's rare to be able to point to a revolution while you're in it, it continues, and it continues in a very robust way. So my plan has been to put off looking for my next opportunity until the book is finished. So I'm just now starting to think about what I will do next. But what I do know about myself and anyone who looks at my career is I'm a builder. I build strong, sustainable organizations, very proud of just how strong CAF America is. It certainly wasn't when I started. And that's what my energy is focused on, is where can I be of most help to an organization looking to really build a strong, sustainable base.
Thank you for all this, Ted. If people want to get a copy of your book, what's the best way to find out more about it and about you and your journey?
Yeah, so the DAF Revolution is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere that you buy your favorite books. So please go find it there. And everyone can find me at tedhart.com.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Ted.
Thank you.
And my thanks again to Ted and, of course, to Julia for sharing today. I really appreciate their commentary on these issues. They're so important to all of us. Coming up next in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, this Thursday, September 25th, our CFRE accredited show, How to Raise, will offer Sphere of Influence, a presentation by Chris Mildner, prospect research analyst at the Nature Conservancy and principal of Strategic Edge Resource Consulting. She will share a proven process for creating and coordinating Sphere of Influence lists, tools that help trustees, volunteers, and fundraisers to identify, qualify, and cultivate new donor relationships. Also, on the PM podcast, you can hear my conversation with Brent Grinna, founder of Evertrue, where he shares his story of his journey from an Iowa farm to the world of philanthropy and fundraising. And of course, I hope you join us again next Tuesday and every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern for this show, Frontlines of Social Good, where we try to bring you the week's biggest gifts, the latest news, and of course, interviews with newsmakers as well. You can catch past programs anytime at DonorSearch.net, home of our longtime sponsor, DonorSearch, the global leader in AI-powered fundraising intelligence solutions. Until next time, take care and do good.